Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's May 8th, 2024. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator focused on startups who need their teams and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Failed that one. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator for funded startups and enterprises that helps teams who are overwhelmed with AWS. We do this by using our over 200 plus Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So no matter where you find yourself on this journey, we're here to help your startup launch better products faster so you can free up your bandwidth for innovation and nail your value delivery every time. So if you're curious about what we can do for you, why don't you head over to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz. Answer a few quick questions, and we'll chart a roadmap for success free. So how can you maximize today's session? Engage as much as you'd like. Ask questions, and if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. And for those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us live at cloudposse.com/office hours. cloudposse.com/office hours. So with that said, let's check out some announcements here. All right. So OpenTofu released 1.7.1. Oops. Yeah. Yeah. Matt, I don't know if you tried using Arc and full screen and screen sharing, but did you see a white screen right now? Yeah.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, it did that last time too. I don't know what I should do other than I close that and reopen. All right. Maybe since I'm sharing the whole screen now, maybe it'll be a little bit better. All right. Yeah, OpenTofu. So OpenTofu 1.7 is the version that just released officially encrypted backends for Terraform state. Turns out there were some issues. Those were promptly resolved. It seemed like it affected predominantly those using Google Cloud Storage as a backend. Also, a fix for InMem. InMem is often used for automated testing, so they fixed that. An ongoing concern, as has become evidenced with all of the open source projects that have been changing their licenses. Well, no, sorry, I skipped ahead to another announcement. Yeah, so this one here is interesting because everyone's aware of the hack that affected XZ at this point. And it was a supply chain attack that kind of, took over the weakest link in a list of projects. And that kind of social engineering attack is really easily carried out amongst open source projects. These are a lot of weekend projects, a lot of projects that become critical dependencies in a chain of software in a software stack. And any one of those can have a critical vulnerability introduced. So two organizations, the OpenJS Foundation and the Open Source Foundation, are just sounding the alarm that this can happen, and we were just lucky to catch the one that we saw. And honestly, there's got to be others out there we just haven't come across. So they give some guidelines for how you can improve security on this side, but this doesn't necessarily address the fundamental underlying issue, which is social engineering. And I have good faith in people. And when you work in open source, you got to be open to working with all different types. And uh, I don't want to be naive, but I also don't want to be a jerk working with open source. I don't know what this answer is, but how do we protect open source projects against social engineering, against people carrying out multi-year attacks or even multi-week or multi-month attacks where they initially feign being your friend and very supportive, and then they start taking over the more and more responsibility in the project, and sooner or later introducing critical vulnerabilities. Any thoughts on this one? How can we, how can we help each other out here for open source? It's like, it's almost like, well, okay, one of the issues here, let's point that out, is, overall, it's hard to assess the credibility of somebody opening up a pull request on a repo. Sometimes they have some history, sometimes they don't. And how can we reduce the burden on open source maintainers to understand the credibility of a contributor? And are these real people? What is their background? What other projects have they contributed to? And kind of like a risk score. And I'm not saying that's the only solution, but I feel like that's one of them, like what you'd have in a marketplace, right? eBay, 99% satisfaction guaranteed.
I think the real answer is replace all the humans with AI.
And hallucinations.
Yes, but I'm only half joking here, tongue in cheek, because I think that the answer is better scanning
Yeah.
and understanding of like what changes are doing, and we can use AI to help us summarize some of that, and we can use other scanning tools and some of those things so that when people do open pull requests, you don't have to read like potentially hundreds of complicated lines of
Yeah.
code. We can actually have machines that
Yeah.
summarize that for us, and we can go like, huh, that doesn't make any sense. Why would he or she be trying to do X, Y, or Z? And then we can dig a little bit further into it, from that perspective. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't trust people, then, or if you don't trust any people, then you don't have open source software, and if you trust too few people, then you have really slow moving open source software. That's
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
And for this to really work, it's got to be carried out at the social coding platform level. I'm talking GitHub, GitLab, and similar providers like that. Also, I mean, I have to imagine that GitHub is working on features in that direction, and will be making those available to open source. But if let's assume they do that. I mean, that's a lot of technology. There's a lot of other platforms out there used to distribute open source, making them then a big risk if they don't have comparable checks.
Yeah, and even when GitHub makes tools available, like adopting them is also like not
Yeah.
it's
That's
not automatic. Like as an example, one of the biggest ones I can show you, like I wrote a blog post several years ago about basically the TLDR use signed commits, because anyone can spoof like anyone else if you don't have signed commits. And the number of repositories that I see that don't enforce signed commits like across all of open source is like crazy to me. Like
yeah.
at least
That's
verify that who the author is. Like that should be number one. Like
that's an
because
interesting one. Yeah.
if you don't, and that's exactly meant like so that no one is claiming to be someone who they aren't when they're contributing
Yeah.
code, right? So even if you trust someone, if I submit something and I just set my contributor information as Eric Osterman, and you use your GitHub username, it will appear that way unless like someone verifies that the commit was actually signed
Yeah.
by you, and you know,
I wonder what a
trust breaks
burden.
down.
I wonder, that's an interesting one. I mean, it used to be back in the day that MFA was not universally enforced or used. Finally, GitHub made that a requirement. They haven't gone to that extent for signed commits.
Oh,
Uh,
you could, yeah, but you can
I,
opt in on any
I know
repo.
you can
Yeah,
exactly opt into
yeah.
it, where I'm leading to or going to. So it's probably only a matter of time before they do make that a requirement. It isn't now. I'm curious from everyone of the open source projects that you work with, how many of them require signed commits today? Or name one that does, if anyone knows.
Does Cloud Posse?
We don't require signed commits,
Yeah, I didn't think
but
so.
yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, it goes down to the threshold. I do want more contributions, but hey, maybe fewer contributions wouldn't be a bad thing. So we're not drowning in PRs and also pushing the bar up, having people learn how to and use signed commits. Curious on people's thoughts. What would your reaction be if a organization like Cloud Posse started requiring signed commits on everything? And I guess anybody here, how many people are we're not going to shame you or do a poll or anything. I'm just curious how many people are using signed commits.
I am, and I would support Cloud Posse doing it. I think that would be, I
Yeah.
think it'd be interesting because it's one of those things that, hey, as people, as organizations, with Cloud Posse, potentially being one of them that, do enforce it, then it requires a developer that wants to contribute to get on board, right? And
Yeah.
it's not a heavy lift here. Like it's not a ridiculous thing to ask of someone. So
Yeah.
it feels like there just needs to be a shifting of the tide. There needs to be things that push people in that direction. So I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah. The more projects that start doing it, the better. It's hard to argue that doing it for security is a bad reason. So
Yeah. I think that, what you and Matt were talking about was interesting because, yeah, maybe GitHub introduces some features that enable some level of, you know, PR scanning that gives you some suspicious warning or a label or something along those lines. But I think there was like two or three at least. I'm thinking PR scanning for that uses AI to see if somebody's introducing anything potentially malicious, right? It doesn't need to have a strong success rate on getting that correct, but just flagging a PR as potentially malicious would be great. And AI would be a great use case for that. And then I think there's a product there for somebody to go and build that could go to people like yourself, Eric, that are running an open source organization,
yeah.
where, hey, it's also doing that. Hey, we're thinking about introducing this new contributor. What is their risk score? What is their
Yeah.
history? Um, and, GitHub might be building some subset of those features, but the reality is, yeah, you do, and you would want it to be at the Git provider level, but they're not all going to build them. Bitbucket isn't going to build that, right? And it would be useful well, I guess Bitbucket gets out because it's just not used for open source in the slightest. Um, but anyway, I think that there's a good product idea there actually, and I think it'd be interesting if it was at a reasonable price point.
And security is always, right? Security in depth or various layers. So I do see a three-pronged approach here. One being the signed commits, two being, some sort of AI enabled to interpret the code contributions as being risky or malicious. And three, some sort of a reputational score that could be attributed, by the committer email address, and that could even span systems then. I'd like to see some sort of an open source reputation somewhere one can trust.
The only thing that I would offer as pushback on the reputation point
Yeah.
is the caveat for brand new developers. If somebody's 15 years old, they get their first computer, they're using some open source thing, and they're like, "Hey, I learned how to code Python. I want to contribute back or Go or Rust or whatever." But they had this is like their very, very first commit, or maybe the second commit. They did Hello World on their own GitHub. Oh yeah, my apologies if my hold on one second. Let me change microphones. Apologies if I was sounding bad on that last
Oh, you
one.
sound a lot better now.
Yeah, so I was just trying to advocate for folks who are new to open source development. If they're brand new in high school, they just did Hello World on GitHub, and they don't have any cred or reputation at all, but they want to contribute. So then as a community, or not even as a community, but as a product, and I'm just going to use Cloud Posse, for example, because we're here talking about it. But if you say, hey, we'd love for you to contribute, but you need to go and contribute to 10 other projects to get your score up to X, whatever X is, before you can contribute here. And then what if those other projects say the same thing? It's kind of like that, you got to get experience.
Welcome to credit, right?
Experience.
Social cred. I think that makes a huge assumption that would reject it. I mean, obviously an organization could choose it, but I'd like to see the intersection of these three. Look, this code looks suspicious. We've never seen you before, and it was not a signed commit. I think we should look at this pull request a lot closer than contributed to dozens of other projects. It's an aged account. Threat score is very low, and it's signed commit. Right? Which one do you want to, review with greater scrutiny?
Yeah, I agree, and I guess what I would say to that is like, yeah, if particularly if it's somebody new, you could raise them up the right way. Say, hey, when you create your account, do 2FA, always do signed commits, and make yourself reputable that way. The only, I guess, and I'm sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate today, but then I
That's
would
all
say
right.
like, so these threat actors, then what do? They start growing these accounts. They're like, hey, we're gonna plant these accounts, and guess what?
Exactly.
3 years from now, they're gonna be ripe. They're gonna be ready to go, and then they start harvesting them, to
No,
keep
that is true.
the trend
That
or
could
keep
happen.
the thing
Although
going.
if you add the fourth prong of some sort of like actual analysis on the code that's being committed and the threat score of that as well, then that actually will help, right? And I'm saying like this is perfect. Like this is a perfect use for AI. Like look at all the changes that are being committed and look against known vulnerabilities that exist and let me know if any of those things, like can they potentially like exploit something with what's being committed, and then we can look at it a lot more closely.
I agree
but
with that.
I mean, I hate to be a naysayer, but I mean, once you bring in any tool, it can be all you need to do is find the weak link in it, right? So AI is a great idea, but I imagine, if I were a hacker, what I would do if something like GitHub brought in AI is I would start submitting PR requests on my own repo and find the one, gradually, through gradient, fastest gradient descent, converge to the types of PRs that the AI system no longer thinks is bad. And that there will be some, because any AI is only based on a particular base of knowledge. Any AI.
I'm not suggesting that any of these things in and of itself are going to solve the problem. But if we combine all these things and layer them together, we start to have far fewer cases where the system can be exploited.
And for sure. It raises the bar for a while.
Then we can concentrate on those things, to next.
And it's about raising the bar. It's about raising the cost and the time for an effort required to carry out any one of these type of attacks. And it's a multi-pronged approach that would be required. And if tools aren't the answer, then let's just give up right now. So
right. I'll just add that to Michael's point there, I think I don't think it's what you were saying, but if anytime there are like you have to achieve X, Y, or Z before you can do something for free for this project. That's definitely a loss, and that means that we've put the wrong approaches into place.
Yeah.
That's going to turn a lot of people off. So, I recently joined an AI community, like where an AI learning community, and this guy had a lot of good content, and it was like $70 a month or something like that. He wanted to charge for it. So I was like, okay, I'll sign up. I signed up, and then the first thing it says is like, okay, now that you're in, you have to achieve like 10 posts and 4 likes and 7 whatevers before you get access to the video content in here, and I'm paying to like be a part of this community. I was like, I immediately like canceled my subscription. I was like,
That's
I
some
am not
gall.
paying you
Yeah.
my money anymore. So I sent the guy like a nasty email, not a nasty email, but a pretty strongly worded email that just said, this is ridiculous that you're asking people for money, and then also to jump through all these hoops where you're the only one who benefits from this because your community appears to be more engaged than it otherwise would be, and so anytime we set up those false barriers to entry or whatever you want to call it, it's definitely like it's definitely the wrong way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Next topic was, let's see here. Yeah, so I had no idea the impact to the bottom line, the degree to the impact on the bottom line, AI and the related products that Amazon has for it is doing to their bottom line. And you can just see it here before it fades out. I guess I reached my maximum article clicks, but they 3x'd their operating income in year-over-year growth to a high of $15 billion. So that is a pretty impressive growth. Don't have more on that.
Yeah.
Other than
3x doesn't sound that big until you understand how big Amazon is.
Yeah.
Or AWS is, right? When I'm doing $100,000 a year and I 3x it, and I'm now doing 300,000, that's not that impressive. But when it's you're already doing billions of dollars a year in revenue and you 3x it, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought this was an interesting attack here that apparently affects multiple VPN providers. And I was surprised that it works because I would assume that this other thing is happening. So the attack here that they're calling tunnel vision is where if an attacker is on the same network as the VPN provider and sets up their own DHCP server, they can send specially crafted packets that tell the clients basically to change their routes. And I would understand that maybe on a local network, like at my house or something, where I'm not immediately distrusting every single client. But I would have to assume that when one is on one of these paid VPN services, that there's no, I don't know what the technical term is, but crosstalk essentially between clients on the same network, that I can only, go exit the VPN and allow traffic to come in, but I can't talk to others on the same network as my VPN provider. But is that apparently not the case, or did I misunderstand the hack?
Yeah, I think you're misunderstanding the hack. This is like
okay.
You're in Starbucks and you're using Starbucks Wi-Fi to be on
Yeah.
the thing, and Starbucks decides that they want to snoop in on everyone's traffic. So on their DHCP server, on their network, they send these packets, which then like now allow them to be kind of man in the middle for your VPN traffic, even before you get to the VPN.
I gotcha.
That's how I understand it, at least. Not that I'm saying
So
Starbucks would actually do that.
So basically,
Nefarious.
well, I mean, but yeah. I guess what I felt was like, I mean, if you have that level of control, then you can, I mean, or like Starbucks could anyways just decide they want to route the traffic a different way, right?
Well, if your VPN didn't respect that, all they could do was redirect encrypted packets, essentially, like, somewhere. And I think this is actually, from what my understanding is that they can actually like intercept the unencrypted traffic.
This is kind of routing.
So, right. So instead of routing it over your VPN tunnel, it's basically routing it like to the unencrypted to their network, and then they read it and then forward it on, kind of thing. It's basically like, even though you have an encrypted tunnel, it's preventing you from sending packets over that encrypted tunnel.
I gotcha. So basically, yeah. But would you have to have, could it be anyone, for example, on a network like Starbucks, or would it have to be some, certain,
no, so the way that it works, right, is that when you connect to the VPN, it adds a route to your local routing table and says send all traffic over this VPN instead, right? So instead of sending it out your normal default gateway, it says send it out to this. And what it's saying is that when you get option 121 from the DHCP server, which can be any DHCP server that you're getting your IP address from, if they set that option, they can introduce a route that essentially is a higher priority that bypasses the route to send the traffic over the VPN table, or over the VPN tunnel, and then essentially make you think that you're routing everything over the VPN tunnel, but in that case you're not, and they can snoop all your traffic.
Yeah, so you think all your traffic's going over it, but you got that DHCP packet that changed your route table. Now it's suddenly not. And unless you're actively monitoring for that situation, I guess that's the fix, is that the VPN clients need to be actively monitoring for that and immediately, shut things down if that happens or something.
Yeah. And I think there's another VPN like vulnerability that just came out somewhere, and I forgot to post it in here. I was reading about it, that even if you're sending everything over the VPN tunnel, in most VPN implementations, you're leaking all of your DNS queries.
Right.
Right now as well. So that's another one that they're saying, like, at least people can understand, can get the information of what sites you're going to over your VPN tunnel, essentially, even though you think you're fully like encrypted, you might not be.
Yeah. I guess that's what DNSSEC is trying to fix, or?
No, DNSSEC is about basically like, so that you can't spoof DNS or like introduce DNS that you're not authoritative over, and that like server to server communication is done like securely, and it's signed by the actual trusted server for that domain. This is actually like you're on the VPN, and
we're getting a lot of
yeah, I think it's still Oliver. Your mic is still feeding back. But this is, you're getting a lot of, even though you think all of your traffic, including DNS, is going over the VPN, it's still querying your local DNS server for all the things that you're browsing across the VPN. So whoever's in control of that local DNS server, like if you're using a VPN at work and you didn't want them to know that you're going to mycompetitorjobsite.com, and you use the VPN as an example, you would still be leaking the information that you were going to mycompetitorjobsite.com on your company network. That's kind of like just a basic example of what's happening.
Yeah, but I thought that the encryption side of DNSSEC would cover that, a little bit like HTTPS, right? So, like there's the request to a DNS server, but it's encrypted about which domain name you're looking for, but I don't know exactly, but I was assuming that's what it was.
Matt might be confirming. I personally, I thought that DNSSEC was just assigning the records, and it's still clear text.
Yeah, I believe that the actual DNS lookup is still completely unencrypted, and it only is signed like the zone that published it signs it with their, it's like a certificate kind of on on the web browser. It's basically like a signing chain to say that no one like in between, like I didn't stand up a DNS server in my company for mydomain.com and I put a bunch of like fake records from mydomain.com in there, and or the Starbucks didn't do that down the street. And now you can assume that if you get mydomain.com, it came from the authoritative server that essentially like is responsible for it, that's delegated, from the root authority, basically.
Yeah. And Cloudflare confirms that, so it does not encrypt the actual query; it only signs it.
All right, next one. I keep on clicking that, but I shouldn't be doing this. Next one is that apparently a lot of specialized clouds are popping up to cash in on the whole GPU craze, CoreWeave being one of those companies, trying to undercut basically the major clouds in providing specialized access to GPUs. I don't know more about it than that, but I'm curious if anybody else is following this trend more.
I'm not, but I wonder how this business model could ever survive in the long term, because Amazon and Google,
right,
and Azure's buying power, with the chip manufacturers who are making a finite number of GPUs, is so much higher, and their cost is so much lower than any of these alternatives. Like I can see them buying some immediate market share, but I don't think it's a long-term sustainable model to try to outbid the largest cloud providers for for the limited resource that's being produced worldwide. It doesn't seem feasible to me.
I would agree with that. It's a race to the bottom.
Born to flip.
Or maybe that. Maybe it's a quick opportunity, like an MVNO almost. Just get market share and then sell it to Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems you also see it's funded by the nonprofit Voltage Park, backed by a crypto billionaire. So I don't know. Like, it just seems crazy to me that you think you could. I mean, there are lots of things you can outcompete them and build a better product for, but like negotiating with NVIDIA and Intel probably aren't the businesses that you're going to do better than the major cloud providers that exist out there.
Yeah.
The only contrary to that I would say is that it was the Bitcoin miners and crypto companies that were able to accumulate large cloud-like infrastructure in the years when no one cared about GPU. I'm not sure I'd want them to go up against AWS or Google, but they do have some historical skill set there. Still think it's a born to flip opportunity.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like Amazon and Google weren't interested in buying all the GPUs in the world at the time. Now they are, and good luck. That's what I think. I mean, they literally have the most cash of like any entity in the world, other than like a few sovereign nations. I mean, so like I don't know how you beat them on that. So it's crazy.
Yeah. All right, changing gears here, talking about Terraform a little bit. It's interesting how sometimes it's hard to explain what a tool is or what it does to someone if they haven't faced the problem. Another way of putting it, and maybe that's why Jeopardy was so effective, is if you frame something as a question, it's sometimes easier for people to understand. So in this case, I thought this was an interesting question by Ned, asking for comments on how to build out GitHub Actions to automate Terraform deployments. And he'd like to include managing multiple environments with a folder-based approach instead of branches. I know many of you are using TFVAR files and folders to manage multiple environments in a single Terraform configuration and repository. What is your workflow when you need to make changes to that configuration? How do you trigger a plan when updates happen in the environment to a specific folder or file? Do you trigger a plan on the PR? How do you promote that configuration then to lower environments or production? So, I know how this would maybe work in a branch-based approach and multi-environment settings, and I have some thoughts on the folder-based approach workflows. So anyways, if you are grappling with those problems, if you have been wondering what those problems, how you solve those problems for Terraform, well, that is why we wrote Atmos in a nutshell. So Atmos solves those problems. Think of Atmos as a var file generator. So it can create all those TFVAR files and help you manage multiple environments in an easier way. We predominantly use it in a monorepo. So we've had to solve a lot of the challenges of doing things in a monorepo. And in order to keep our configurations dry for all of those var files, we added concepts like inheritance and imports and data sources. And all of that comes together with a command that we wrote called describe affected, part of Atmos, which will tell you in a monorepo exactly what was affected. So now you can go and strategically plan and apply all of your Terraform code in there. So all of those GitHub actions that we write are public. We document them at atmos.tools. We'll share a link for that. And one of the interesting things here, though, that wasn't called out, which is probably one of the harder things if you want to do Terraform in CICD, is how do you actually have confidence that what you approve is what you apply, and that you only apply after you commit, meaning after you approve and merge that pull request and then apply those changes. So then you suddenly need some way to handle plan files. And that's the biggest thing that I see is lacking in most of the open source solutions for managing GitHub Actions for Terraform, is they don't address the plan file. Problem is, when you start addressing the plan file, now you have a new problem. What if multiple PRs merge affecting the same pieces of infrastructure? That plan file might become stale, needs to be invalidated. So how do you handle stale plan files? And it goes on from there. So we've thought long and hard about those problems, and we've solved those in Atmos and the Atmos GitHub Actions that we provide. That's all I had to say.
Yeah. I'll just make a comment that this guy Ned he does the thing on YouTube called Ned in the Cloud. I don't know if anyone's ever seen him. He has like a channel. I've watched a bunch of his things, and I think he has like it's like Terraform Tuesdays or something. He has like a regular section, and most of my opinion, I'm not trying to be judgmental or anything. My opinion, most of his content and advice and everything is very much around the theoretical and not the hands on the ground. This is battle tested because I've done this at multiple large organizations or any of that kind of thing. So I've often seen that some takes from there that I would consider to have been like probably right on paper, but didn't survive like the war, or everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, that kind of thing. Like, this is someone who never got punched in the face. Like, or a lot of the takes are based on that from my perspective. And that's nothing to take away with him. I think he does a very good job of educating on the features and functionality and new features that come out in Terraform and how they're supposed to be used and all of those types of things. But a lot of it does lacks the practicality base to it from my perspective, at least. So I'll just say that out there.
Yeah, what's interesting, I mean, that's true of a lot of academics, like going to college, right?
Yeah,
It's good in theory, get out into the workforce. Yeah.
Well, and my point is, a lot of the arguments, having read the comments here, a lot of the arguments back seem very theoretical to me. They don't necessarily seem to come from the perspective like that we've been doing this like ourselves, a lot for like large enterprises or, something like that. It's very, it's missing some of the, I don't know what the right word is, like the depth of have battle scars with this stuff over years.
Yeah. Good points, man.
I think there's at least one answer to this, or one definitive, and I'd be interested if anybody would push back on it. But I think that the branch-based workflows, if you're like creating a separate branch for each environment that you're managing with Terraform, that feels like it's a huge anti-pattern. And I that was like mentioned by someone in the comments at least. And that's just like, I've come into Terraform environments and just really struggled with people that believe that branches are a good way to manage different layers of state. It makes it so that you can do hey, merge to this branch type of workflows easily, right? But then you have different branches in different states, and you then need to true those up. And there's really no good way to do that. Even when you have 2 branches, that's a pain in the ass. When you have 3, it's a total nightmare. So I can say that.
Optimistic.
Yeah, 3 is optimistic, right? Like somebody's going to ask you for the 4th next week, no question.
Right.
And I think that we're actually just starting on a new project right now for a client where they're on vanilla Terraform. They have like a timeline issue, so we're not going to upgrade them to any sort of framework. And I'm coming back to these types of problems that are asking that question, and I think that it's very much, hey, pick a framework and go with it, because you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel on how you deal with these problems. Like you're not going to get it right, and picking something like Atmos or Terramate or Terragrunt at least is going to give you some path to follow where you have a community. And I don't know, that's how I approach it. But
that's a good point.
I'm sure other people are like, yeah, let me reinvent the wheel all day,
it's
every
so
day.
Interesting. Like, and it's, it's educated software engineers and developers approaching this, and something about Terraform leads a lot of people to throw away tried and true arguments for why you want a framework, why you want, to use Angular or React or, some, Symfony or other types of frameworks, Rails.
Vue.
Come on, let's all use jQuery. That's what everybody in the Terraform community is saying. It's just, let's jQuery it up.
No, I think they're all saying let's use native JavaScript with no frameworks, because
exactly,
even
that's
jQuery
what they're all
framework.
Yeah. When it comes to Terraform, they're all just saying, no, when it comes to Terraform, we want to be vanilla all the way, and we don't even want to be aware of or use existing frameworks or patterns and conventions that other people therefore might understand and be able to help them out with.
And I think that, this is not this could come off as like, elitist or something like that. I think the 3 of us, that we're all speaking right now have software engineering backgrounds. There's a bunch of people that get thrown Terraform, and they're coming from I used to click in a console or the sysadmin, like I'm really good at managing Linux. And they don't know those patterns. They haven't gone through that pain of building their own thing. So I think there's something to that where that has maybe come to pass for those folks. But I think generally, yeah, it does seem There's software engineers that I know that, you know, have gone into the Terraform realm and been like, yeah, let me roll my own vanilla Terraform thing.
That, you know, those were good points. And it's kind of the convergence of the two sides, right? Dev and ops. And depending on which path you're on, you can approach the problem from two different ways. And I think actually many developers, you know, might actually, that's one of the things that turns them off from Terraform initially, is that they don't see any frameworks immediately until they dig beneath the surface and see that, oh yeah, they're out there.
Yeah, I think that devs come from their own framework, whether that's Flask, which is like really small, or Rails, which is so heavy. And if you don't have any of that, if you don't have any, you know, best practices that are thrown at you, which I don't think the Terraform documentation does the best job at, and the Terraform as a tool doesn't do a good job at, then yeah, you can come into it and just make a ton of mistakes. And yeah, it is probably off-putting for new people into Terraform. I don't remember my days in it that long ago, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, good points. So something interesting here is TFLint just announced that they have introduced some new features that leverage some of the introspective capabilities of Terraform, of HashiCorp Terraform 1.8. So first, I compliment them for putting this, you know, up front and center on the release notes. That, you know, they're not just trying to slide this in. They link to the discussion about why this change was made and some of the impact of that. But nonetheless, it was done. So TFLint is probably like the de facto linter for Terraform, used in thousands of GitHub actions and integrated into products everywhere. And it itself has now been infected with the BSL license because they're leveraging BSL license code that's linked in the TFLint binary. What it effectively does is it makes it dual licensed. So it still maintains its original license, but it also now has this BSL license as well. I'm not a lawyer, can't testify on the total blast impact of that. I just don't like it from a complexity standpoint. It's so easy when things are MIT, Apache 2, or permissively licensed. You don't really have to think twice about how to do it. Now, this is actually something you might want to consult with your in-house counsel, or, you know, raise it up the ladder to see how it affects you.
Consult with in-house counsel. There is nothing I would rather do less.
Right? So the thought is now, fork. You know, there's some conversations going on if this is something that now is, you know, too critical to let happen, and that a fork is maybe due. But I don't want to see these forks. It's a splintering of the community and attention.
I also wonder, like, I mean, I can only think, like, does this give HashiCorp like the transitive property, like,
right?
ability to go after someone? Like, you're not actually using Terraform, like, in, you know, that's BUSO licensed, but you're using TFLint to lint like OpenTofu things, but you, because of that, the Terraform parsing engine is using the 1.8 HCL parsing engine from their BUSO licensed code. Like, are you then violating? Like, it feels like so complicated and murky right now. I can't even like follow how this all works. Like,
I just hope, I know this is naive of me, but it comes back to me thinking the best of people, which is the good thing and the bad thing about me. And I'm just hoping that IBM is going to save the day here and just restore order and give us back MPL Terraform and make it all go away.
And kind of a technicality here. I wonder if this BizSL code could be moved into a a plugin.
We have too many people talking here. Or, I don't know what's going on. Sorry, Oliver. I think there's some background noise we pick up. Somebody else was talking.
Should I go or should I try? I'll minimize how much. I was just saying that maybe there's a way that they could create like a TFLint plugin kind of thing where to move all that code there so that it becomes optional. Maybe,
That's not a bad idea.
possible.
If that's possible. It's probably too deeply in the core and would require architectural
Yeah.
change. Yes, but
Maybe.
that's the way some of this stuff might work. And then, use plugins at your own risk.
Yeah, I think the problem becomes that, as we early on pointed out, like as more and more things, excuse me, as more and more things diverge, you really do have two separate products. So you're going to need separate tooling for all of them, right? Because this is only necessary because HashiCorp introduced new features into HCL essentially, like to do what they want to do, and they put it in the HCL package that's underneath like Terraform that's licensed this different way. So I don't know. I mean, it seems naive to believe that like all the same tools are just going to forever work on both of these things as they continue to diverge further and further apart over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's basically, this is the future, whether you like it or not. There is a organization out there, was it Tofu Utils? And I believe they're forking a lot of the major projects and ensuring compatibility with OpenTofu. I believe they also mentioned possibly taking TFLint under their stewardship. That's it. I mean, it's easy to fork a project. It's hard to maintain parity. It's hard to keep investing in it without sponsorship and support. So I like the sentiment. I'm not optimistic about the practicality of it.
They have Tofu Lint at the very top, updated 2 days ago. So that sounds promising.
Oh yeah, it looks like they might be already pulling the trigger on that one. Let's see, do they mention?
Take that back. If you look at the very top, it says updated 3 months ago. So misleading. Maybe they just forked it 2 days ago.
So Eric, while we're here, would you give us an update on how up to date or ready you think this whole tofu ecosystem is? When we initially started talking about it, it was very early days. Is it in a place where migrations or switches could occur?
I believe so, and more companies are doing it. And I've heard good things also from like Matt Gowie here at Masterpoint. They recently helped a customer migrate over. We're still early enough that I think there's relatively low risk to doing it because it won't affect your state or corrupt it in any way. That if things go south, you can always go back to earlier, be it a non-BSL licensed code or BSL if you're not violating the license. I think with the latest features that they've added to OpenTofu, namely the state encryption, albeit early days and still having some bugs, that's like the type of differentiators we're looking for to justify making such a switch. More exciting things are planned. If you look at the OpenTofu GitHub issues, let's see here. What's nice, they're doing this top ranking issues, and this is going to inform their roadmap. Not everything is planned. Some of them won't be possible, but there's exciting things here to look out for coming into OpenTofu, hopefully.
And I'll just share the advice that we just gave to a client literally yesterday. We're migrating them off Terraform Cloud. They are on Terraform 1.6.3. and we're migrating them to a different tacos provider that won't support that version, right? So they were asking like, hey, what do we do? And our advice was, yeah, let's make the switch, but you're going to be completely fine, like Eric just said, to migrate back if the tofu project does have any major problems, you're going to be fine to migrate back if you like really need to, as long as you don't take advantage. And this is kind of a sad thing, but it is the reality if you're more risk adverse, don't take advantage of the new features. So continue to use the feature parity features that Terraform and Tofu have in common. And as long as those are aligned and your code is, working with both, then you're in a good spot. So that's what we're suggesting right now. If you are moving to an environment where you can't use Terraform, if you're already on Terraform and your automation and all of your tooling is working with Terraform, you can migrate at your leisure if you want to, like if it's something that's important to your organization. But there are cases where it's required to migrate, and I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice, although every month that goes by, it's harder and harder to know what the features are that are in parity as each new release comes out. It's really hard. Even like this is my job. I do it like all day, every day, and like there are things that that I confuse sometimes, and I can only imagine this is only one little slice of someone's job, and they don't realize that X, Y, or Z feature is is an OpenTofu only feature, and they use it, and now there is no going back. Like unless you have a linter or something that tells you like, hey, this is an OpenTofu only feature.
Right. Yeah.
Good luck. Good luck. In the next 6 months of trying to keep these two apart.
We need ideally a tool that will like inform you of like, hey, where's your code at in alignment of the two projects, and then at a minimum, it would be nice to have like a microsite that just was a single page that kind of listed out like, hey, how are these two things diverging? I'm sadly not going to build either of those, but it would be a really nice open source project.
The linter approach would work, and I mean, a lot of those are pluggable, so it's really just coming up with
a good point
that captures being aware of them. So I mean, I know OpenTofu members are listening to this, and it would be an interesting thing. I think it's been asked for before. I don't think it's news. I think they're aware of it, but a nice side-by-side comparison so we know where we stand between HashiCorp license, Terraform, and PL
Although,
license.
I think that makes perfect sense, but it's not really in OpenTofu's best interest to point out all the features of theirs you shouldn't use that will allow you to switch back to Terraform if you don't want to. Like if they have limited resources to invest, like that seems like the worst place to invest them. Like honestly,
that's true.
Like
well, I think that I think we want to increase the not just perception, but like the feeling of safety that people that want to migrate to Tofu, we want to give them the capability to do that with the least amount of risk possible. So I feel like that it's being upfront about that and saying, hey, if you're risk adverse, maybe don't use these features for X many months. And, as we prove ourselves, we're going to make it so that you're going to look at these, you're going to be intrigued to use them. And at some point, you're going to say, hey, this is working and it's going great. And this team seems to be shipping. So let's make it happen. Yeah.
So just, being fair and balanced here, making recommendations on which way you should go as a business is, something that has to be evaluate all the information available. I thought this was an interesting thing that I saw, which was that the sandbox application is in limbo right now because of that cease and desist letter that came up. So I don't believe there's closure on that matter yet. I don't believe, HashiCorp has admitted any fault. And obviously, OpenTofu vehemently denies any copyright infringement. And I'm just curious, like you know, since I'm not a lawyer, I don't know how long these things take and what the course of action is or what's going to happen. And I just don't. I mean, this is again them trying to just sow doubt in the project and its longevity.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just want to point out that we're at time, Eric. Just
all right. Thanks.
Sorry.
Man, I feel like these office hours are going faster and faster as there's more interesting conversations taking place. So I think I might need to remove the Q&A from our announcements there because we haven't gotten to that too much lately. That's probably got to be a separate office hours, maybe. Q&A with Cloud Posse. All right. Well, let me get back to wrapping things up here then, if I can find my slides. Oh man, there were interesting things to talk about. One is Pulumi getting caught. Well, red-handed might be an exaggeration, just because I mean they do say in their search results that this was generated by AI, so they're not being what's the word, elusive about it. They're being upfront about it, but it's a great way to rub developers the wrong way is to produce a lot of wrong answers that pollute search results. So they admitted that they're aware of the problem. I don't know that they've rolled out a solution. And as of recently, they were still ranking for those things. And the last one was a podcast that somebody introduced me to, which was really interesting for anybody who's an open source founder. And in the episode that I just listened to was interesting. One of the founders of Sonatype mentioned that they're still today, years later, seeing 30% of all Log4j downloads are of the Log4Shell version. And it's sad that I mean, you know how many projects out there then have that vulnerability, and nothing we can really do about it. All right. Well, thanks all for your time. We're going to be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. Stay tuned. It'll be posted in a few hours. We've also started posting some shorts. It's a great way to maybe get others excited about office hours. So check out our shorts if you want to try and share it with your team and show the fun things that we do here. We have our podcast, which is a syndication of our office hours. Go there to listen to office hours, however you listen to podcasts. And finally, if you are interested in working with Cloud Posse and seeing if we can move the needle for you at your organization, go to cloudposse.com/quiz. Again, cloudposse.com/quiz. Book a session with me directly, and we'll see how we can move the needle for you. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next week, same time, same place.